So you would have from a line of ownership the property and the non-property. So, and then if you add another line on participation, and then you add another line towards the essentiality or the historical necessity of these kinds of labor or positions in society, then you'd have a sort of strange figure where it looks like um, you've divided classes into sort of their alignments with others. So the more close they are to each other, based on the dividing lines put together, the more bases they have to link up with one another. So for example, on the basis of ownership, definitely you'd have the industrial proletariat, agricultural workers, farmhands, drivers for public transport. You'd have the Industrial Reserve Army, and you'd even have the lumpen proletariat as a non-propertied class. Yes, but if you divide it based on participation, then the Industrial Reserve Army, who aren't actually participating in, the main sources of produce in a society, as well as the lumpen proletariat, are split. So you could see how the Industrial Reserve Army could be used because they're one step divorced from the industrial proletariat, agricultural workers, farmhands, etc. And if you even put the line of historical necessity, of course, no one will argue that drug pushers, and gang members are necessary in socialism. So even if they are non-property, but because they are not necessary for socialism or a more advanced society, neither do they participate directly in production. They are twice divorced from the industrial proletariat. And thus, you see the actual basis and the actual facts of the matter in which the lumpen proletariat are used to crush organized working class resistance. The same way as it is on the other side of the equation, where, of course, for the property, you would have most professionals, certain services sector members, middle peasantry, craftspeople, big state officials, and all these functionaries. But if you divide them again towards participation and how essential they are towards this kind of society, I mean, towards the next forms of society, you would also begin to see why there is actually a basis for big state and military officials and the big bourgeois functionaries to not really be in cahoots with most professionals and certain service sector members because they're still divorced by one step by when you divide them all the lines. And you can see exactly how, because they are on the opposite side of these people, are especially the big comprador and the big landlords and financial aristocrats, they're thrice removed from the industrial proletariat. It's almost like this is a graph of like class antagonism, right? Where it's so directly against each other, even from a visual perspective. You already see the basis for this to be truly class antagonists. So hopefully with that kind of discussion, or even the published version is already helpful from the table's perspective, you could actually see how we've had experiences of that where you'd go to a community. This is funny, like um we have two schools who would organize one community, and then and then another school that organized another community on different sides of the track, of the railroad track. Now, what they had organized were gangs. One was like a male dominated gang, another one was like a female youth dominated gang. So they're both youth, they're both a mix of out of school youth and in school youth, and they had gang like capabilities. And even if they were, you know, they technically had the same issues against demolitions and all that. They're both technically not the most, technically not property in the way the bourgeois are. right? But because of their notions of like how their praxis, their life is existing in those quite lumpenic activities, there have been incidents where they met up, technically part of the same organization of youth, but because they didn't like each other, they had they had a riot. Yeah. So you see it play out live, right? Where it's not romantic at all, where it's like, oh, all the people got up one day and suddenly got mad at capitalism. In the same way that there's basis to unite, the differences in production and everything is also giving us a, a basis to disunite and even flip on each other. And you see that with Marx's example, for example, of how he called the I believe the National Guard, but he looked at the French military, but it's not the official French military, as lumpens who subjugated the workers who rebelled or incited rebellion in 1848. However, in another study, it would be realized that they're actually not lumpen proletariats, but they came from sectors of the peasantry, but not exactly, the same as agricultural workers. So there really is, you could see it. And even how, so it doesn't have to be just the lumpens. You see this in daily life where there is basis to disunite and unite all over it. And it's not just topics on like say gender or race, just on a pure class perspective, or rather from a pure praxeological entanglement perspective, you know, just because of how different we all are preoccupied with various activities and concepts of the world are different. There's so much basis also as well to disunite, even if there is basis to align.